Everyone will call me the homewrecker, but the wives were the people I was trying to save. I never believed a woman should build her entire life around a man who could be tempted by a stranger with a phone and 3 flattering messages. So I found married men, made them choose me, and waited until their wives finally understood what they had married. Most women demanded screenshots and explanations. One woman kept asking for the full thread, and I thought that proved she was too frightened to accept the truth. I was certain I had done her a favor. My name is Tessa Vale. I was 31, and by Monday, August 10th, 2026, more than 200,000 women followed my page, No Woman Waits, because I said what they were afraid to say. I reminded myself that comfort was how women became trapped. I never stole anything capable of staying loyal, and a clean collapse was kinder than a slow betrayal. Those ideas had built my career, my audience, and the life I controlled from my downtown loft. That morning, I stood inside Bloom Women's Legal Aid Center. The rooms smelled of coffee, printer paper, and flowers. Young women waited for photographs with me. Women asked me to sign my guide about separate bank accounts. Maya Ortiz, the center's director, introduced me as a fearless voice for women who had forgotten their strength. I believed every word. I wore a purple enamel pin on my jacket. It said "Sisters First" in silver letters. Helena Ward had given it to me when I was 19, and my mother was close to losing our apartment. My father had left without warning. He took most of the savings, moved in with another woman, and stopped answering my mother's calls. My mother had spent years depending on him. She had left her job, trusted him with every bill, and believed love meant sharing everything. After he disappeared, I watched her sit at the kitchen table with unpaid notices around her, asking what she had done wrong. Helena was a young legal aid attorney then. She helped my mother stop the eviction and showed us which papers mattered. She told me that one message or screenshot could be twisted, so I should always keep the full thread, every date, and every receipt. I clearly remembered that lesson. I simply believed I understood it better than she did. At Bloom, Helena sat near the front beside her husband, Daniel. She was 42 now, a senior family law attorney. People spoke about her as a possible future judge. She looked controlled even when tired. Her notes were arranged in a straight line. Daniel looked less controlled. He checked his watch while Helena answered messages from a client. When he leaned toward her, she raised one finger to show she needed another minute. His mouth tightened before he looked away. I noticed everything. Helena had always helped women, but she treated life like a case file. She worked late, answered calls during dinner, and spoke carefully when people wanted emotion. Daniel had probably spent years feeling like the least urgent item on her list. That did not make him innocent. It made him easy to understand. After my speech, Helena hugged me and said she was proud that I had built something useful from what happened to my mother. Then she warned me that exposing betrayal was not the same as deciding another woman's future for her. She said support still required consent. I heard caution, but I also heard fear. Women who built respectable lives often became afraid of anything that could disturb them. I reminded myself that stability was only another word for a cage when a woman refused to test the lock. During the legal discussion, a student asked Helena whether screenshots were enough to prove cheating. Helena explained that a cropped image could tell almost any story. She said she always asked for the full thread before making a serious decision. Several women nodded. I smiled because it sounded like Helena was turning heartbreak into paperwork again. Daniel saw me smiling. For 1 second, our eyes met across the room. He looked away first. That evening, I returned to my downtown loft, removed my shoes, and opened sparkling water. The city lights covered the windows. My purple pin still rested on my jacket. I checked the dating apps I used to study how married men presented themselves when they believed their wives were not watching. Most profiles were boring. Some men hid their faces. Others claimed they were separated while their photographs still showed wedding rings. Then I saw Daniel. His profile used a picture from an architecture event. He described himself as married, lonely, and considering separation. He wanted someone spontaneous, warm, and interested in his work. I could have sent the profile to Helena. Instead, I opened Helena's public page. I studied their vacations, Daniel's projects, the restaurants they visited, and the books Helena never had time to finish. Then I created Sophie Lane, a woman who loved architecture, hated schedules, and believed talented men deserved attention. I placed the Purple Sister's first pin beside my laptop while I built her. 20 minutes later, Daniel matched with Sophie. I told myself I was not entering Helena's marriage. I was testing whether it had a door. Then I sent the first message. 11 days passed before I met Daniel in person. By Friday, August 21st, Sophie Lane had already become the most important person in his phone. I reminded myself that lonely men always created their own doors. I only showed them where the handle was. Every morning, Daniel sent messages before Helena woke up. Every night, he complained that Helena was still working, still answering clients, still speaking to him like there was always one more problem to solve before she could look at him. Some of his complaints were fair. Helena had cancelled dinner twice that week. She had also postponed marriage counselling again because of a difficult custody case. Daniel said he felt invisible in his own home. I did not need to invent that part. I only made sure he repeated it until it sounded like permission. Sophie praised his architecture. She asked for photographs of his unfinished projects. She remembered small details Helena probably forgot because she had real responsibilities. When Daniel mentioned a building he had designed near the river, Sophie told him it looked calm and intelligent. He thanked her 3 times. I never told him that I had found the project on Helena's public page. That morning, I wore a soft blue dress and met him at Atlas Coffee House. Daniel arrived 10 minutes early. He had shaved carefully and carried a small black box in his jacket pocket. He looked nervous, but he also looked pleased with himself. Married men often called their fear excitement when a beautiful woman was waiting for them. He told me that Sophie looked exactly like her pictures. I thanked him and asked about his work before he could ask too many questions about mine. That was how I kept control. I gave men enough truth to feel safe and enough mystery to make them work harder. Daniel spoke for almost an hour. He said Helena was not cruel. He said she was loyal, intelligent, and respected. Then he explained that she was never fully present. Even while sitting beside him, part of her mind remained inside another person's legal problem. He admitted that he had started using dating apps because he wanted to know whether anyone would still choose him. I heard the truth inside that sentence. He had not been pushed into betrayal. He had gone looking for it. That was why I never believed I stole husbands. A loyal man could not be stolen. Daniel removed the black box and placed it between us. Inside was a silver bracelet with a small blue stone. He said it reminded him of the dress in my profile photograph. I had worn that dress because Helena once posted that Daniel loved blue. I let him fasten the bracelet around my wrist. Then I told myself that accepting one gift was harmless compared with the lie he was already living. It was only proof that he had crossed the line by choice. Before we left, I mentioned a women's conference in Atlanta. Sophie had supposedly been invited to speak, but she could not afford the hotel. Daniel offered to help before I asked directly. By the time I returned to my loft, he had transferred $800. There was no conference. I put the money into the account Chloe used for No Woman Waits expenses. Chloe sat at my kitchen counter with her laptop open. She was my best friend, editor, and account administrator. She had helped me turn old relationship stories into short videos that reached millions of views. When I showed her the bracelet, she laughed and said Daniel had moved quickly. She asked whether Helena knew anything. I told her Helena knew only that her husband had become distant. Chloe started building an anonymous post about a respected professional woman whose husband was searching for affection online. She removed the names but kept enough detail to make the story feel real. The comments arrived within minutes. Women called the unknown wife blind, arrogant, and too dependent on her marriage. Others praised me for exposing men before their wives wasted more years. The numbers rose faster than our usual posts. Chloe smiled when she saw the new followers, but she asked whether the wife had agreed to have her marriage turned into content. I reminded her that people trapped in burning houses did not first sign permission forms. Chloe looked at me for a moment, then returned to editing. Maya Ortiz called that afternoon about the Bloom page. She had seen the anonymous post and asked whether it involved one of the center's supporters. I told her it was a general example. She said women came to Bloom because they wanted control over their own choices. She asked me to make sure I was not replacing one controlling person with another. I said I was teaching women not to wait for men to become honest. Maya did not argue, but her voice became cooler before she ended the call. Nora Bell reacted differently. During a planning call for her podcast, she joked that I could identify a weak husband faster than most wives could find his hidden account. She said the story would make a strong episode if I ever had permission to discuss it. I heard the interest, not the condition. That evening, Daniel sent a message from a second number. He said Sophie had contacted him through 2 different accounts and asked whether something was wrong. I told him one account was for work. He then said Helena automatically backed up shared messages because of her legal work. He asked me not to delete anything important because Helena always demanded the full thread when she believed someone was hiding something. I smiled at the screen. Helena wanted full threads because she thought enough information could protect her from pain. I believed that was another form of weakness. 2 hours later, Helena contacted me directly. She said Daniel had followed No Woman Waits and reacted to several older posts. She asked whether he had contacted me or anyone on my team. I told her he had not. Helena asked me to inform her if that changed. She said she did not want guesses or cropped images. She wanted complete records. I stared at the purple Sisters First pin beside my laptop while I answered that I understood. Then I opened Daniel's messages again. He had written that he could not keep pretending everything at home was normal. I encouraged him to book a hotel for a few nights and think about what he truly wanted. He reserved a suite that same evening. Before midnight, he told me he was ready to tell Helena there was someone else. Saturday, September 12th, arrived 3 weeks after Daniel moved into the hotel, and by then he had stopped speaking about Sophie like a mistake. He spoke about her like a future. I reminded myself that men only called something complicated when they wanted permission to keep both lives. Daniel had already chosen. I was simply forcing him to stop hiding behind delay. Bloom Women's Legal Aid Center held its fall fundraising dinner at Pine and Glass, a rooftop restaurant above downtown Raleigh. Maya had asked me to speak about emergency savings, separate accounts, and the importance of women knowing where every legal document was kept. Helena was seated near the front with several attorneys from Ward and Price. She wore a dark green dress and looked tired, but controlled. The purple Sisters First pin was fixed to my white jacket. Helena noticed it when I walked past her table and gave me a small smile. She still believed the pin meant what it had meant when she gave it to me. I believed it meant I was willing to do what other women were too frightened to do. Daniel had followed my instructions exactly. He waited downstairs until I sent him a message near the end of the dinner. I had told him that Sophie wanted him to stop hiding. I had also told him Helena deserved to hear the truth in a place where she could not turn the conversation into another private legal meeting. Daniel thought the night would prove his courage. I knew it would prove something more useful. After my speech, I placed my phone against a glass candle holder and started a live stream for No Woman Waits. Chloe stood beside the sound table with her laptop. She asked whether Maya had approved a live relationship example. I told her the names would explain themselves soon enough. Chloe pressed her lips together, but she kept the stream running. I introduced the subject as a real case about a successful woman who had become so comfortable in her marriage that she stopped seeing the man beside her. Several guests laughed softly. Helena did not. Daniel entered through the rooftop doors carrying a small jewelry box and a silver apartment key. His face was pale, but he walked directly toward Helena's table. The room became quiet before he reached her. He told Helena that he had been living at the hotel because there was another woman. He said the relationship had become serious and that he had rented an apartment where he planned to begin a new life. Helena looked at him for several seconds. She did not ask who the woman was. She asked whether he had moved money from their joint account. Daniel admitted that he had used some of it for the hotel and apartment deposit. Then he turned toward me and held out the key. The guests followed his hand. Helena followed it too. I could see the exact second she understood. Her fingers closed around the edge of the tablecloth. She asked whether I was the woman Daniel had been seeing. I told her the name Daniel knew was Sophie Lane, but the woman behind Sophie was me. A few guests gasped. Someone near the bar whispered my page name. The live stream numbers climbed. Daniel looked confused because he had not expected me to reveal the false identity that quickly, but I gave him a calm smile. I wanted him to believe I was finally choosing him openly. Helena asked Daniel whether he had sent me money. He admitted that he had helped with travel and bought gifts. She then looked at me and asked for the full thread. It was the same request she had made before. Complete messages, complete dates, no cropped images. I heard a woman trying to delay humiliation by turning it into evidence. I reminded myself that paperwork was Helena's shield whenever emotion became too dangerous. I told the room that the important parts were already prepared. Chloe connected my laptop to the restaurant screen. I displayed screenshots of Daniel complaining about Helena's late work, cancelled dinners, and cold manner. I showed the message where he said he wanted to leave. I did not show the messages where I had praised every project, promised that Sophie would live with him, mentioned the false conference, or encouraged him to book the hotel. I also left out the transfer. Those details would distract from the lesson. Maya stood and asked me to remove the private messages from the screen. She said the fundraiser was not the place for an unapproved public exposure. I told her women donated to Bloom because they wanted truth, not comfortable speeches. Nora Bell was seated near the back. She had laughed during my introduction, but now she was staring at the screen instead of taking notes. She asked whether Helena had agreed to this demonstration. I answered that betrayal never asked the wife for permission either. Some guests applauded. Others remained silent. Daniel placed the apartment key on the table in front of me, as if it were an engagement ring. Helena did not touch him. She asked the restaurant manager to preserve the live stream and any event footage. That made me smile. Of course she wanted records. She still believed enough documents could make Daniel's choice less real. Helena then asked to speak with me away from the tables. We moved several steps toward the glass railing, though everyone could still see us. She said a woman was not weak because she wanted complete facts before ending her marriage. She said I had not protected her. I had turned her private pain into entertainment because I needed an audience to confirm that my methods were right. For one moment, I remembered my mother sitting at our kitchen table while relatives told her she should have known better than to trust my father. They had called their cruelty advice too. I looked at Helena's face and almost understood what she meant. Then I saw Daniel waiting behind her with the key, and I decided Helena was only trying to make me feel guilty because she could not control the result. A clean collapse was kinder than a slow betrayal. I told her Daniel had already been looking before I found him. I told her no loyal husband could be stolen. Helena answered that Daniel's betrayal belonged to Daniel, but my choices belonged to me. She asked for the full thread one final time. I refused. When I returned to the center of the rooftop, the purple pin caught the light beside Helena's image on the screen. Chloe ended the live stream earlier than I had planned. She told me afterward that she would edit difficult stories, but she would not help create evidence or surprise women in public again. I assumed she was nervous because the story had become larger than anything she had produced. By midnight, the photograph of me wearing Sisters First while Helena stood behind me had spread across every local page. I watched the follower count rise and decided Helena needed one final push. If she signed the separation papers quickly, no one could pretend I had failed to save her. 19 days after the rooftop dinner, on Thursday, October 1st, Daniel was still living in the rented apartment, and Helena had already separated their joint accounts. I reminded myself that strong women did not wait for men to make the final decision. Helena had finally started the divorce process, which meant my plan was working, even if she refused to admit that I had helped her. Daniel did not see it that way. He sent me messages every morning asking when I would visit the apartment. He had bought new furniture, cleared space in the closet, and placed the silver bracelet he gave me inside a small box beside the bed. I told him Sophie needed time. I said a real beginning could not happen while Helena was still controlling the separation. The truth was simpler. I had no interest in living with a man who had abandoned his wife after a few weeks of attention. I never stole anything capable of staying loyal. That afternoon, Helena asked me to meet her at Ward and Price family law offices. I expected threats. Instead, she sat across from me in a small conference room with only a notebook and a glass of water. She looked tired. There were dark marks under her eyes, and for the first time, her hair was not perfectly arranged. She said Daniel had made his own choices. She did not blame me for every problem in their marriage. She admitted that she had worked too much, cancelled counselling, and stopped noticing how lonely he had become. I almost respected her for saying it. Then she explained that Daniel's betrayal did not give me permission to lie, accept money, or use their private life for my audience. She asked me to stop contacting him through false accounts. She wanted the bracelet and travel money returned. She also wanted every post about their marriage removed and the full thread sent to her. The full thread again. Helena spoke about it like the complete messages were more important than the fact that her husband had chosen another woman. I told myself that paperwork was how she avoided facing rejection. She said that if I cooperated, the matter could remain private. I heard surrender. She was giving me a chance to disappear because she knew she could not defeat me publicly. I told her she should be grateful. Daniel had already been looking for another woman before I found him. I had only shown Helena the truth before she wasted more years. Helena looked down at her notebook. Her fingers stayed on the closed cover. She said she once believed I had turned my mother's pain into something useful. Now she believed I had turned it into permission to control other women. Her voice became quieter when she asked why I had used the same record-keeping advice she gave me years ago to enter her marriage and hide parts of the story. For a moment, she did not look like an attorney or a possible judge. She looked like a woman who had helped a frightened teenager and now regretted it. I decided the sadness proved her legal position was weak. A clean collapse was kinder than a slow betrayal, and Helena was only angry because I had forced the collapse to happen in public. I refused every request and left the office with the bracelet still around my wrist. That evening, I opened Daniel's latest messages. He was becoming less romantic and more nervous. He said Helena had contacted their bank and removed his access to several accounts. He also said people at his company had started asking questions after the rooftop video spread online. I needed him angry enough to keep moving forward, so I sent him a screenshot that appeared to show Helena telling another attorney that Daniel was unstable and should not be trusted professionally. The first part came from a real email. The rest did not. I changed the order and added a sentence Helena had never written. I told myself it was only a faster version of the truth. Helena probably did think Daniel was unreliable. Chloe saw the file when I asked her to clean the image for a post. She studied it for several seconds and asked where I had obtained the full email. I said the source did not matter. She compared the font and spacing, then closed the editing program. She said she would not publish it. She also said this was no longer about helping Helena. I reminded her that anyone in my position would protect the mission when powerful people tried to silence it. Chloe answered that she was protecting herself. She left my loft without taking the laptop she usually carried home. The next morning, I went to Riverside Podcast Studio for my interview with Nora Bell. I expected her to discuss the viral dinner and my growing follower count. Instead, she placed printed copies of several older No Woman Waits stories on the table. She asked why the men in different cases used the same phrases about feeling invisible. She also asked why each story included a gift, a hotel, and a sudden request for separation. Nora wanted to know whether I had contacted the wives before the husbands left. I told her I only spoke to wives after their husbands had proved they were disloyal. That was close enough to the truth. Nora asked whether I would provide the complete conversations. I said private messages could not be released without careful review. She postponed the interview. She claimed the episode needed more verification. I heard fear again. Nora had enjoyed my stories when they brought attention to her show. Now that Helena was involved, she wanted distance. Maya also delayed approval for my November keynote at the Sisters' first gala. She asked for written consent from every woman whose marriage I planned to discuss. My messages to sponsors received slower replies. Some were not answered at all. Then a woman named Kendra Lewis contacted me. Her marriage had been one of my earlier successes. She said Helena had spoken with her and that the screenshots I once sent Kendra did not match messages her former husband still had. She asked for the full thread and the dates of every transfer. Helena's exact language had spread to another woman. I blocked Kendra and told myself Helena was building an emotional intimidation campaign because she could not win through facts. That night, Daniel asked whether I loved him or only hated what Helena represented. He said he had lost his home, many friends, and part of his professional reputation. He wanted to know when Sophie would finally move into the apartment. I told him love required courage and that he still had one final step to take. On Saturday, November 7th, he would come to the Sisters' first gala, stand beside me, and prove in front of Helena and the live stream that he had chosen a new life. Then I announced that the gala would feature my first fully public marriage rescue. Saturday, November 7th, arrived with rain against the windows of Civic Arts Hall and 300 women waiting inside for the annual Sisters' first gala. I reminded myself that fear always appeared just before an important truth became public. Maya had allowed me to keep my keynote only after I promised that I would not identify private people or show unverified records. I agreed because I knew rules were often created by people who wanted powerful women to speak more softly. Chloe arrived early to manage the live stream, but she barely looked at me while checking the cameras. She had not answered my messages for 2 days. I assumed she was still embarrassed about refusing to edit Helena's email. Nora Bell sat in the second row with a notebook on her lap. Helena sat near Maya at a table reserved for legal aid sponsors. She wore a grey suit and no jewellery except her wedding ring. Daniel waited outside with the apartment key in his pocket. He believed that by the end of the evening I would finally enter the life he had created for Sophie. The purple Sisters' first pin rested against my jacket as I walked onto the stage. The applause was loud enough to erase every delayed reply and uncomfortable question from the past month. I began with separate accounts, emergency savings, and the danger of allowing a man to become the center of a woman's identity. Then I told the audience that advice was useless without proof. Maya straightened in her chair. Chloe looked at me from the production booth. I gave her the signal to display the first slide. Daniel's photograph appeared beside Helena's. Their names were printed underneath. Maya stood and asked me to stop. I told the audience that silence protected weak men, not women. Then I played part of a voice message Helena had sent after the rooftop dinner. In the complete message, she had admitted that Daniel made his own choices and asked me to remove their private information. I cut those parts. The audience heard only her saying that my actions had entered her marriage and caused damage. I explained that powerful women often blamed the person who revealed betrayal because blaming the husband meant admitting their lives had been built on something weak. Helena did not move. That calm expression irritated me more than tears would have. I displayed Daniel's complaints, the hotel reservation, the apartment lease, and the altered message that made it appear Helena had called him unstable to another attorney. I said I had never created false identities to obtain money, never requested gifts as part of my tests, never changed messages, and never contacted wives before their husbands had independently chosen to leave. Chloe turned away from her screen when I said it. I noticed, but I told myself she was afraid of the attention. Then I sent Daniel a message to enter. The doors opened, and he walked down the center aisle carrying the silver key and the small black box that once held my bracelet. Several people recognized him from the rooftop video. Daniel climbed onto the stage and stood beside me. He told the room that he had signed the separation agreement. He said he had lost his home and many friends, but he believed he had found a woman who truly understood him. He held out the apartment key. Helena's hand rested flat on the table. She asked me to stop the live stream, remove the private documents, release the complete thread, and leave her family out of my platform. Her voice was firm, but I heard one final attempt to control the ending. I reminded myself that comfort was how women stayed trapped. I told Helena that Daniel had been willing to betray her before I requested a gift or promised him a future. That was true. He had opened the dating profile. He had answered Sophie. He had chosen to lie before I asked for anything. Helena did not defend him. She simply said that Daniel's betrayal belonged to Daniel and my choices belonged to me. Her refusal to deny my accusation made me feel stronger. The room had heard the truth, and even Helena had accepted it. Daniel lifted the key again and asked when I would move into the apartment. I looked at him and decided it was time to finish the lesson. I explained that Sophie Lane had never existed. I told him she had been created from his complaints, Helena's public posts, and the things he wanted to hear. I said I would never build a life with a man who abandoned his wife after a few weeks of attention. Daniel's arm lowered slowly. The key remained between his fingers. I told the audience that this was the final stage of every rescue. The man believed he had won a better woman. Then he learned that he had only proved he was unworthy of either one. A few women clapped. Others stared at Daniel. His face became red as he asked whether the apartment, the promises, and the plans had all been false. I told him the truth had always been more important than his feelings. He looked toward Helena, but she did not stand or call him back. I never stole anything capable of staying loyal. Daniel had destroyed his own marriage, and I had saved Helena from spending another year beside him. Helena asked one final time whether I would provide the full thread. I told her there was nothing in the private messages that changed the result. She asked whether that was my final answer. I said it was. Helena nodded once and said she now had everything she needed. I saw acceptance in that movement. She had stopped fighting because the marriage was finished. Chloe removed her headset. I told her to keep the cameras on, but she closed the control program and walked out of the production booth. Her empty chair appeared on one of the side screens for several seconds before the live stream switched to a fixed camera. Maya remained seated with her hands folded. Nora raised her hand and asked whether I would release the complete, unedited conversations that supported the claims I had just made. I told her I would release whatever was necessary when the time was right. The applause was uneven, but the viewer count had passed 100,000. Comments moved too quickly to read. Daniel remained alone near the edge of the stage, holding the key to a home I would never enter. I took a photograph with the audience behind me, uploaded it to No Woman Waits, and wrote that Case 9 was closed. By the time I left Civic Arts Hall, the post had already become the most successful one I had ever published, and I was certain every woman in that room would eventually understand why I had been right. 10 days later, on Tuesday, November 17th, Maya called me back to Bloom Women's Legal Aid Center. I expected a sponsor meeting. Instead, Helena sat across from me with Kendra and 6 other women whose marriages I had rescued. Chloe's chair was empty. Helena placed printed conversations on the table and asked for the full thread one last time. Then, every woman opened her copy. The same pattern appeared again and again. False names, private details, promises of love, gifts, transfers, hotel rooms, edited screenshots, and public humiliation. Helena reminded me that she had taught me years ago to keep complete records because cropped messages could create any story. I had used that lesson to control women. She used it to connect them. Maya revoked my access to Bloom. Nora published a correction. Sponsors cancelled their contracts. Chloe's lawyer provided the account logs from my burner profiles. I said the husbands had still chosen to cheat. Maya answered that their betrayal did not excuse my fraud, lies, or use of private pain for money. The settlement forced me to return gifts, repay transfers, and compensate the families. I received 5 years of probation and community service. My life changed in 5 ways. I reported to the sanitation depot before sunrise. My income went toward restitution. Chloe and most supporters disappeared. Helena divorced Daniel without thanking me or speaking to me again. My name online became connected to the case instead of my speeches. Part of me still believed those men deserved exposure. What I could no longer pretend was that I had given women freedom. I had decided my anger mattered more than their choices. The Purple Sisters' first pin stayed hidden beneath my orange cleanup vest while I emptied bins on the streets where those women rebuilt their lives.